Well, we got the data the other day showing that in the year to February this year, actually the net migration gain is about 52,000. Now that's well in excess of anybody's expectations, and it's double the average net annual migration gain for the past 25 years, which is 25,000 people. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to my weekly commentary on the mortgage market, housing, the economy overall, etc. with NZHL. There's something interesting happening with regard to the housing market, not so much, I guess, at the moment in terms of going to move things around, but somewhere down the track, these two very large, almost of most fundamental forces out there are going to cause the cycle, obviously downward at the moment, to turn back the other way when people do start to recognise what is happening out there. In other words, the ground is starting to shift underneath the still, basically, weak housing market there. There's two components to it. Now, one comes on the demand side for housing. If you go back about a year, New Zealand had a net migration outflow of 20,000 people in the year to February 2022. COVID related, no problem with that. 6 months ago, we still had a net loss that was around about 9,000 or so. And I remember speaking at a number of forum out there saying, well, look, over 2023, we're probably going to have a net positive migration gain with the borders, opening up, etc. Maybe it's going to be about 15,000, something like that. Well, we got the data the other day showing that in the year to February this year, actually the net migration gain is about 52,000. Now that's well in excess of anybody's expectations, and it's double the average net annual migration gain for the past 25 years, which is 25,000 people. Now, most obviously, this means extra demand for consumer goods in the economy, so it's going to help out the retailers to a small degree. I wouldn't get too optimistic about that. But of course, in the housing market, you've got a lot more people needing accommodation. Eventually, this is going to show through in the rental market. It's going to apply some extra upward pressure on rents, especially at a time when we've got landlords leaving the sector because of the tax changes put in place by the government to make people leave the sector as landlords. This is explicitly going to decrease the availability of rental accommodation out there. So at some stage, there's going to be a rents response out there. Not really happening at the moment, but stronger population growth, more demand for housing. Obviously, there's going to be more people looking to purchase a house also. And for the vendors, once they eventually realise what is happening out there, there's still great reluctance at the moment to sell their properties is likely to increase. They'll decide to maybe, wait a little bit longer to see what's happening. Now, this boom in net migration is not in popular consciousness as yet. People are still focusing on other things. We've still got 7 days isolation for COVID in New Zealand, one of the few countries in the world sort of still stuck back in that pandemic mode. People are still in an element generally of fear. It's an election year. People are putting off their decisions there. Obviously, the recent flooding events occupying people's minds as well. And of course, we've got the strong focus on interest rates, the Reserve Bank's recent 0.5% increase I discussed last week, and consumers overall feeling fairly dour about the whole thing. But now, of course, we get to the other side of the equation. I've talked about demand for housing fundamentally is now lifting with a new migration boom in place. Well, what about supply? All around the country, we've had this boom in new house construction over the past 2 to 3 years, encouraged by some planning changes, some moving out to the regions, all these sort of things. But the warning I started giving from 2 years ago was this is unsustainable. We're seeing a boom in construction, which the population growth, over a shortish to medium term length of time is not really going to justify. We can already see the consent numbers falling away. So in the 3 months to February, the number of consents issued for new dwellings was 18% lower than a year earlier. February was down 29% from a year earlier. I've got a monthly survey of businesses out there. The feedback from architects is overwhelmingly bad. The orders to them for designs for new houses, townhouse complexes, etc. have pretty much dried up. The feedback from the sector with regard to land development, all of that, is basically fairly bad. There's going to be quite a falling away of house construction in New Zealand over the next 2 to 3 years. You put it together. We're seeing a lift in housing demand underneath everything, and we're going to later on see a decrease in the pace of growth of new supply. So there's still going to be extra supply, but there's really not going to be enough, especially once people start running the numbers. The average occupancy per household in New Zealand is about 2.7, and so then if you've got an extra 51,000 people in the population from the migration boom, well, you do the maths as to how many extra houses are going to be needed there. For the moment, this won't matter. People's attention is strongly in other areas. But this is something that you need to keep an eye on for one day when the worries about interest rates start easing off. Don't know when that's going to be. People are going to shift back to looking at some of these fundamentals. Look, it might not happen until after the election, but just be aware. The ground is shifting underneath everybody with regard to these fundamentals in the New Zealand housing market. All the best out there.